Get this. In 1995, Salina, Kansas only had one homicide.
Wow.
And it happened to be the case we're diving into today, the unsolved murder of Gina Ciphers.
Oh, wow.
Just imagine a young mother, living in a seemingly peaceful trailer park,
Right.
dropping her son off at daycare just days after Christmas and then vanishing.
It's a story that really captures your attention because of how much mystery surrounds it even decades later.
Right.
And that's what we're going to be doing today, is trying to untangle some of this truth using firsthand accounts from the audio truck podcast The Deck.
Okay.
And then we're also going to be looking at local news reports from the Wichita Eagle and the Salina Journal.
Cool.
Well, buckle up. This is going to be a wild ride.
Oh, yeah, I'm ready.
We're going back to 1995.
Okay.
Salina, Kansas.
Oh.
Let's set the scene, particularly in the Faith Court trailer park where Gina lived.
Okay.
What was life like there, and what do we know about Gina's routine?
Yeah, paint us a picture.
So Faith Court was your typical close-knit trailer park community. People knew their neighbors. They looked out for each other. And Gina, a young mother in her early 20s, was part of that fabric.
Okay.
She had her own trailer, which, spoke to her independence, and she was deeply devoted to her son, James.
Okay.
And her days really seemed to revolve around caring for him and maintaining a relatively quiet life.
So when Gina didn't show up to pick up little James from daycare,
Right.
that must have sent just shockwaves through the community.
Absolutely.
Walk us through that fateful day and that heart-wrenching discovery of Gina's body.
Yeah, so it was actually Gina's boyfriend, Jimmy, who received a call from the daycare that afternoon expressing concern because Gina hadn't arrived to pick up James.
Right.
And this was completely out of character for her.
Yeah.
When Jimmy went to their trailer to check on her, he found her lifeless body on the living room floor.
Oh, my gosh.
So you can imagine the shock and the horror of that moment.
Yeah, it's hard to even fathom.
Right.
What did the crime scene tell investigators?
Right.
Was there any sign of forced entry, robbery, or struggle?
That's where things start to get complicated. The crime scene was chaotic in part because there were ongoing renovations in the trailer.
Okay.
So it was hard to distinguish what was out of place. There was no sign of forced entry.
Okay.
Nothing seemed to have been stolen.
Right.
Gina's purse was found with its contents scattered.
Okay.
But even the $150 Christmas gift from her parents was still there.
Wow.
There was a presence of cleaning solution, which suggested that the killer might have tried to cover their tracks.
Oh, so that already adds another layer of mystery.
Right.
So young mother's found murdered in her own home, seemingly without a motive,
Right.
in a community that had never experienced such a crime.
Exactly.
How did Salina react?
Yeah.
And what were the initial steps taken in the investigation?
Well, the community was understandably terrified.
Of course.
I mean, this wasn't just a crime. It was a shattering of their sense of security.
Yeah.
And law enforcement was also facing immense pressure to find answers.
Yeah.
And so they started by interviewing those closest to Gina,
Okay.
including her boyfriend, Jimmy. And intriguingly, the trailer park's maintenance man, a man we're going to call Steve.
Okay, so why Steve?
Yeah.
What made him a person of interest so early on?
So there were several factors that kind of made Steve stand out.
Oh, okay.
He lived just a few trailers down from Gina and had a reputation for making inappropriate comments towards women.
Okay.
In fact, Gina had confided in her parents that she found Steve creepy and that he'd even asked her for a key to her trailer.
Oh, wow.
Which they had warned her against.
Yeah, that certainly raises red flags.
Right.
Did anything else link Steve to the crime scene?
Here's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
Steve was actually scheduled to visit Gina that very morning. They were selling an old stove, and Steve, having access to their on-site storage unit, had found a buyer for it.
Okay.
And he was supposed to give Gina the money from that sale that day.
So considering Gina's cautious nature about letting people in,
Right.
could she have opened the door for Steve thinking it was about the stove money?
It's definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
And to add to that, the money from the stove sale was missing from the crime scene.
Oh, wow.
So this, along with Steve's proximity, his unsettling behavior, and the fact that there was no forced entry, made him a prime suspect.
It sounds like the investigators had their work cut out for them.
Definitely.
What about Gina's family?
Yeah.
What was their reaction to this tragedy and the initial focus on Steve?
So Gina's family, especially her sister Maria and her mother Anita, were utterly devastated.
Yeah.
And while acknowledging that Jimmy was a loving father to James, they had always harbored concerns about his influence on Gina.
Okay.
They felt that he was had isolated her from them, and that their relationship wasn't as rosy as it seemed.
Can you give us an example of what led them to this belief?
Yeah, so Maria actually recalled that when she visited Gina, she wasn't even allowed inside the trailer
Right.
and could only speak to her sister through a cracked door.
Wow.
This wasn't the independent Gina that they knew.
Yeah.
So while Steve was under the investigative microscope,
Right.
Gina's family initially suspected Jimmy.
Okay.
However, this suspicion was quickly dispelled.
Okay.
When the police confirmed Jimmy's alibi,
All right.
he was at work when the murder occurred.
So we have a crime scene that speaks volumes but reveals very little.
Right.
A suspect who seems tailor-made for the narrative but lacks concrete evidence.
Yeah.
And a grieving family struggling to reconcile their love for Gina with their suspicions about those closest to her.
Absolutely.
What happened next in this tangled web of a case?
Well, with Jimmy's alibi checked out and the investigation into Steve kind of hitting a wall, the community was left living in fear.
Yeah.
And the question on everyone's mind was a killer still lurking among them?
Right.
Tragically, that fear became a grim reality just 7 months later.
Oh, no. What happened?
3 people, an elderly woman named Dolores McKim, her daughter Carol, and Carol's great-nephew Christopher,
Okay.
were found murdered in Dolores's home.
Oh, my gosh.
And the brutality of the crime and the seemingly random nature of it sent shockwaves through Salina.
Yeah, 2 horrific murders in such a short span of time in a small town like Salina must have been incredibly unsettling.
Yeah.
Did the investigators believe that these cases were connected?
Initially, the police didn't see a direct link.
Okay.
They cited differences in the methods of the murders.
Mhm.
But for the people of Salina, the similarities were impossible to ignore.
Right.
Both involved seemingly random acts of violence,
Yeah.
potential use of weapons found at the scene,
Okay.
victims who didn't appear to have any enemies.
Yeah.
The community was understandably on edge.
I can imagine the sense of panic that must have gripped the town.
Yeah.
But you mentioned a major breakthrough in the triple homicide case.
Right.
Tell me more about that.
The investigation into the triple homicide was intense, fueled in part by the community's fear
Right.
and through a combination of witness statements and a crucial tip from a corrections officer
Okay.
who recognized a man acting suspiciously at Dolores's funeral.
Wow.
The police were able to zero in on a suspect named Alan Eugene White.
So they had their man.
Yeah.
What happened next?
Things moved quickly.
Okay.
The police discovered that Alan had lied about his alibi. And crucially, his DNA matched evidence found at the crime scene.
Oh, wow.
Faced with this overwhelming evidence, Alan confessed to the triple homicide
Oh.
and to the sexual assault of Carol.
Oh.
He was sentenced to life in prison without parole.
While that must have brought some relief to the community, what did this mean for Gina's case?
That's where we see a contrast in how the 2 cases unfolded.
Okay.
While Alan's arrest and conviction provided closure in the triple homicide, Gina's case remained unsolved.
Yeah.
It took almost 2 years for a reward to be offered in her case,
Really?
compared to the swift action taken in the other. And this discrepancy was a point of frustration for Gina's family.
Of course.
And it raised questions about whether socioeconomic factors played a role in how the investigations were handled.
That's a troubling thought, that the resources allocated to a case could be influenced by the victim's background or where they lived.
It's a complex issue.
Yeah.
While the police maintained that both cases were investigated thoroughly, the difference in pace and public attention was undeniable.
Right.
The triple homicide, with victims from a more affluent area, received more media coverage, including a feature on America's Most Wanted,
Oh, wow.
which ultimately contributed to Alan's capture.
So while Salina could breathe a sigh of relief with Alan behind bars,
Right.
Gina's case remained a chilling reminder that there was still an unsolved murder in their midst.
Yeah.
How did the investigators proceed? Did they revisit Steve as a potential suspect in light of the triple homicide?
While Alan was initially considered a potential suspect in Gina's case as well,
Okay.
he was ultimately ruled out. The focus did shift back to Steve for a period, but the lack of concrete evidence remained a hurdle. Gina's family, desperate for answers, eventually decided to take matters into their own hands,
Okay.
inspired by America's Most Wanted.
Right.
Gina's sister Maria reached out to a renowned private investigator named Charlie Parker.
Now, Charlie Parker, from what I understand, was known for his work on cold cases.
Yeah.
What did he bring to the table?
Parker was intrigued by the case
Okay.
and agreed to help. He dove deep into the details,
Right.
quickly developing a profile of the killer.
Right.
He believed that the perpetrator was an impulsive sexual predator
Okay.
and pointed the finger squarely at Steve,
Uh-huh.
suggesting that he may have even had an accomplice.
That's interesting. Was the police on board with Parker's assessment?
Not entirely.
Okay.
While Parker's involvement generated new buzz around the case, some of his claims seemed to contradict the official police statements,
Really?
which raised doubts about the accuracy of his findings.
Can you elaborate on those discrepancies?
Yeah, so for instance, Parker claimed that Gina's autopsy photos showed signs of a struggle,
Right.
with bruising on her arms.
Uh-huh.
However, Detective Garcia, who worked on the case, refuted this, stating that he didn't recall any bruising.
Wow.
Additionally, while Parker stated that Stave had prior convictions for sexual offenses,
Mm-hmm.
a background check revealed only minor offenses like disorderly conduct and passing bad checks.
So we have conflicting accounts and a lack of clarity regarding key pieces of evidence.
Exactly.
This is truly a case shrouded in ambiguity.
Yeah.
What about the potential DNA evidence mentioned earlier?
Right.
Did that offer any leads?
You're referring to the body fluids discovered at the crime scene,
Yes.
while never officially confirmed by the police.
Okay.
This discovery led to speculation that Gina might have been sexually assaulted,
Oh, wow.
adding a new layer of complexity to the investigation.
I can imagine, if true, would this point to a more personal motive, perhaps suggesting that the killer knew Gina?
It's a possibility. Yeah.
Sexual assault is often about power and control.
Right.
And it could suggest a pre-existing relationship,
Mm-hmm.
or that the perpetrator had been watching Gina.
Mm-hmm.
However, without official confirmation from the police about the nature of the evidence,
Right.
it remains in the realm of speculation.
So we have a web of possibilities,
Yeah.
but no concrete answers.
Right.
With the focus on Steve fading
Yeah.
and the DNA evidence shrouded in secrecy.
Mm-hmm.
Where did the investigation go from there? Did any other leads emerge?
Years later, in 2012, a glimmer of hope appeared in the form of a new suspect.
Okay.
A man who we'll call Oscar was convicted of a murder in Nebraska that bore striking similarities to Gina's case.
Wow.
This rekindled hopes that they might finally have a break.
Did this new lead pan out?
Uh.
Was Oscar connected to Gina in any way?
Unfortunately, no investigators worked tirelessly to establish a link between Oscar and Gina, but their efforts proved fruitless. They confirmed that while Oscar had spent time in Salina, it was years before Gina's murder.
And they just couldn't find any connection between the two.
So another dead end. It must have been devastating for Gina's family to have their hopes raised, only to be dashed once again.
It was a major setback, especially since Oscar represented the most promising lead in years. You know,
Right.
it was a stark reminder that despite advancements in forensic technology, justice can sometimes feel agonizingly out of reach.
Yeah, but the pursuit of justice for Gina didn't stop there, did it?
Absolutely not.
What happened next?
Gina's case remains open and the investigation continues. New DNA testing is being conducted on key pieces of evidence.
Wow.
And the initial suspects are being revisited with a fresh perspective.
I find that fascinating, decades-old evidence being re-examined through the lens of modern technology.
Right.
It speaks to the dedication of law enforcement and the unwavering hope for answers.
Yeah.
What specifically are they focusing on with this new round of DNA testing?
You remember those body fluids found at the crime scene?
Yes.
That's a primary focus,
Okay.
with advancements in DNA analysis. Investigators are hoping to extract a viable profile from that evidence, which could potentially lead to a match in criminal databases or even identify an unknown suspect.
That would be a game changer.
Yeah.
It's incredible to think that a detail considered inconclusive years ago could now hold the key to solving this case.
It's a testament to the importance of preserving evidence, even in cases that seem unsolvable at the time. You never know what breakthroughs the future might hold.
Right. And it's also a testament to the enduring strength of Gina's family, who never gave up hope. What has their journey been like throughout these years of uncertainty?
You know, Gina's family, especially her son James, who's now an adult with children of his own,
Wow.
has had to navigate life with this gaping wound of unanswered questions.
Right.
Imagine the weight of not knowing who took your mother, why, or if they'll ever be held accountable.
Yeah.
It's a heavy burden to carry.
It's heartbreaking, and yet there's this poignant element of hope in the fact that one of James's children is named after Gina. It speaks to the power of memory and the enduring love that transcends tragedy.
Absolutely. Gina's legacy lives on not only in the pursuit of justice, but also in the lives she touched and the family she left behind.
Right.
It's a powerful reminder that behind every unsolved case, There are real people whose lives have been irrevocably altered. Their pain and their quest for answers deserve our attention and empathy.
Well said. As we reach the end of our deep dive into Gina Ciphers' case,
Oh,
we're left with a sense of both hope and frustration.
yeah.
Hope, because the investigation continues, and advancements in DNA technology offer a real possibility finding answers.
Right.
Frustration, because justice has been delayed for far too long.
And it reinforces a crucial point. Someone out there knows something. Maybe they dismissed a seemingly insignificant detail at the time.
Right.
Maybe they were afraid to come forward or thought their information wouldn't make a difference.
Yeah, it's never too late for the truth to come to light. And it might be that one missing piece of the puzzle, that one phone call,
Right.
that finally brings closure to this decades-long mystery.
Exactly. So if you have any information about Gina Ciphers' murder, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem,
Right.
please contact the Salina Police Department or the Kansas Bureau of Investigation.
There's a $5,000 reward being offered for information, leading to the arrest and conviction of the person or people responsible for Gina's death. And for those of you who are as captivated by this case as we are,
Yeah.
we encourage you to listen to the full episode of The Decade.
Mm-hmm.
Explore the local news archives and share Gina's story. Keeping her memory alive is crucial in the ongoing fight for justice.
And if you found this deep dive into a complex and compelling cold case insightful, be sure to subscribe to The Deep Dive. We explore a new listener-submitted topic every week.
Yes, we do.
Delving into true crime, unsolved mysteries, and historical events that continue to fascinate and intrigue.
Until next time, stay curious,
Mm-hmm.
stay engaged, and never stop seeking the truth.